Hello and welcome to Vintage Helena. For several years, Jeannie McLean Warden and I have profiled many folks for the Vintage Helena series. And for those of you who have followed us, you know that most of the folks we've profiled have been in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and even a person or two in their 90s. The two individuals you're going to meet in this program, however, are much, much younger. Ryan O'Connell is 43. He went to Hawthorne, CR, and graduated right here at Capitol High in 1992. He's a Bobcat, class of 97. Ashley Lindgren is just 19. She went to Rossiter, CR, and she too is a graduate of Capitol High, class of 2016. But she's going to be a Grizz. Ashley, when she was a little girl, just 6 months old, was diagnosed with kidney failure. Ryan, on the other hand, has had 2 functioning kidneys all his life. Not too long ago, when they were both tested for their blood types, it was determined that they were a match. And now, several months later, Ashley and Ryan have something very much in common. Ryan's an organ donor. He gave one of those good kidneys to Ashley, the gift of life. So this is where our story begins and has a happy ending and has a good dose of education about being an organ donor.
12 people a day die that are on the donation list. And so you think of, that many people that are out there and the fact that they could probably be helped. And yeah, it was major surgery that I had. I had an organ taken out, but it was very minor compared to what she went through. And in hindsight, I would do it again today. There's no question in my mind. And so I've just kind of always been taught, and that instilled with me with how important it is to help other people and the importance of family and friends.
Some things are just meant to be.
They are. It was just fate. Surreal. Surreal.
Absolutely.
Surreal.
Yeah.
Very surreal.
Yes. When I was 6 months old, I was diagnosed with polycystic kidney disease. So, I grew up having a normal life. I had amazing parents. I have a little brother. In 8th grade, I had my first kidney transplant. My mom had donated to me her kidney. Well, when I was in 4th grade was when we started doing the testing, because we had thought that I would need the transplant, around 4th or 5th grade when my kidney function was not so great. But then my kidney function started to get better, and then I ended up not needing a new kidney until 8th grade. So my mom, still a perfect match. Then she gave me her kidney. We were down in Salt Lake for about a month. We spent Christmas down there that year. And then I came back after about 2 months off of school, and everything was going great. And then I started school at Capitol High. I was very involved in the theater program there. I was on the golf team, and I had a couple biopsies of my kidney when we would have little scares. It's where they take a little bit of tissue of the kidney to look at it under a microscope, see if there's anything going on with the kidney, if there's rejection. Then my sophomore year, I was still on the golf team, and then I decided to do track as well. And I was also doing theater this whole time. And then I ended up just doing managing. But my sophomore year, I got to do a Make-A-Wish trip. Kids under 18 years old who have had major surgery or a major illness, cancer, things like that, all get a Make-A-Wish. Mine, I decided to go to WrestleMania 30 for the WWE. And I got to meet Big Show, Sheamus, AJ Lee, who was the Divas champion at the time, and she let me hold her championship, which was awesome. And I met Rey Mysterio and my hero at the time, still is one of them, but John Cena. I got to meet him, and that was an incredible experience. And then I was one of 75,167 people in the building, and we ended up setting the attendance record that year. So that was really cool.
Really? Yeah.
And I'm obsessed with WWE. That's been like a big part of my life, since transplant. When I was in 8th grade, my dad and I, we would go down to Salt Lake every other week for checkups. Just we had to go down to Utah a lot at that time. Every other week we had to go down for checkups, and then it went to a monthly. But when my dad would take me down, you know, he would turn on Monday Night Raw and he'd be watching, and I'm like, Dad, can you turn this off? I just want to watch The Voice. And then I got hooked, you know, just this whole new element of just entertainment. You know, it was a little bit of drama. It was just a little bit of all these different aspects of entertainment. Like, and then there's the fighting, which is really cool too. I love that part a lot more now than I did when I first started watching. But it's my favorite thing right now, you know, ever. So then, you know, junior, senior year, normal stuff, golf team my junior year, track again, always doing theater. Then my senior year, I ended up making the Capitol High Cadet team, which is the dance team there. And I didn't know this when I was trying out, but we had been invited to perform at halftime at the Holiday Bowl in San Diego.
Oh, cool.
We were named the best dance team in Montana. I wasn't on the team at the time, but then when I made the team, that December we ended up going down right before New Year's, and we got to perform at halftime. There were about 300 dancers, which was really cool. I got to dance with my favorite choreographers, Matt Stefanina and Dana Alexa, who are phenomenal. They have I think Matt has about 10 million subscribers on YouTube or something like that. It's insane. And just getting to meet them was awesome. And then also my senior year, I ended up getting my graduation present, which was WrestleMania 32. So I went again.
Really?
And I ended up meeting probably 20 more wrestlers, I'm guessing, which was amazing. That was my graduation, birthday, and Christmas present all in one. And then in 2016, I graduated from Capitol High, and I planned on majoring in theater at the University of Montana. The following fall, I would begin. But that summer, I got to perform with the Montana Shakespeare Company. Their owner, Kim DeLong, the director of the company, had asked to work with me personally from, you know, he had also worked with us at Capitol that year. I was one of the leads in several shows that year. So that was really cool. I got to do 3 shows with them. But about halfway through the 3rd show, I had a horrible medical emergency. On August 9th, 2016, I was getting ready. I was packing up my things, you know, I was starting to pack for college, and I was really getting really excited. And then I had this weird pain in my stomach, and I kind of had a similar pain before. The kidney is connected to the vein in my first kidney was connected to the vein in my right leg. And sometimes I would sleep with my leg up against me, you know, I would have this weird pain over the kidney. So I'm thinking, oh, maybe I cut off blood supply or whatever for 5 minutes. But it was never anything major. It would never affect my lab results or anything. But this pain was that pain magnified by 100. It was, you know, it was really bad. Just the pain was so bad. I couldn't sleep. My back was hurting. Just everything, every part of me was just aching. So I got out of bed, and it took a lot of effort to get out of bed. I went downstairs, and I went to my mom, and I'm like, Mom, we need to go to the emergency room. Something is very wrong. And so we got there at about midnight, and I remember sitting in the, my mom was checking me in, and I was sitting in the emergency room, and I was just shaking, it was like I was shivering, and I was kind of stomping my feet, shivering that bad. And she's like, are you cold? And I'm like, no, it just really hurts. I was, you know, warm. It was middle of summer, and everything just hurt so bad. So we went back, and they got my vital signs, they got my weight, all of that stuff. And then they got me back, and they put an IV in my hand, and they got some labs drawn, and I was like, you know what, I need some pain meds, please give me something. So they gave me some Dilaudid. And they're like, okay, you might get woozy when we give you this, and blah, blah, blah. So they gave me some, and then I just remember head spinning, and then I was knocked out. And then I remember waking up in the middle of the night. I think they did an ultrasound of the kidney, and it had turned out there was no blood flow to the kidney at all.
None.
There was none. And then my creatinine, which kind of measures the kidney function, was sky high. Like, it was not good. They're thinking maybe rejection, or one doctor was thinking maybe it's my appendix or something, but and then they were like, we can't treat you here. We need to send you to Salt Lake City.
You've been there before.
Yeah, that's where all of my doctors are. That's where they know what they're doing, down in Salt Lake. So I remember my mom leaving. She went home, packed up some stuff. You know, we didn't know what was going on, so she just got me a couple things, and then my grandma stayed with me while my mom did that. But you know, I had to get knocked out again because it hurt so bad. And then then my mom got back, and then probably 5 minutes later we got in the ambulance, and I was life flighted down to Salt Lake, and I slept for most of that. I just, when I'm on airplanes, I really, really love just looking out the window and just looking at everything. You know, I'm a Montana girl. I grew up in like a hunting family. We're really outdoorsy. I just love looking out over the mountains and everything. That's always fun. And I remember when we were on the plane and on the ambulance, you know, the two doctors or attendees, I guess, when they were with us, they were just really cool, you know, really, they were funny, they were joking around, you know, making me feel as comfortable as possible. And then we get down to Salt Lake, and I just remember going over a bunch of bumps on the way up to the hospital and just being like, this hurts, ow. And then we got to the hospital, and they're like, oh, this is Ashley, we need to wheel her back. And they knew I was coming. And the way it was in my mind, I know it wasn't this way, but I just remember, all I remember is waking up, and they were wheeling me back for surgery, and I just remember saying, okay, I'm in a lot of pain right now, just cut me open, do whatever you need to do, just fix me. And so then they ended up giving me a bunch of anesthetic, and I just knocked out, and then they were having the surgery. So during the surgery, I know they were talking to my parents a lot. My mom had called my dad, or tried to get a hold of him, but you know, they have no service up there.
Right.
So right before my dad and my brother were going to leave for Sealy from the cabin, my aunt and my grandma pull up at the cabin and are like, stop, you need to pack your things and head to Salt Lake. And you know, my dad's like, what? So they had to tell him what was going on. So, and he said that was the fastest trip he had ever taken down to Salt Lake. Like, he was just speeding down there. But when we were during surgery, they told my parents that the kidney had flipped and cut off the blood supply completely. They didn't know if the kidney would survive. They actually thought that they were going to need to remove the kidney during surgery. They didn't think that it was going to make it. But by some miracle, they were able to save it and kept it in there. And they put a dialysis catheter in my chest because they knew the kidney function wasn't going to be great right away. So they gave me that, and I had to do dialysis a couple times when I was in the ICU. But and I remember waking up, and I had a giant incision right down the middle of my abdomen, and you know, it was hurting. I remember asking my mom, like, hey, what's going on? And she told me that there had been an infection in my abdomen. They were saying they don't know what caused that. It was just a random thing. So they drained out like this giant infection, all the pus. They flipped the kidney back, and then they took out my appendix, because at first they thought that maybe the appendix was a problem, but it turned out it wasn't. So, but it also, they were saying it saved me a surgery because, you know, that could always be an issue, but just saved me the pain in the future. Then they told me that originally they didn't think the kidney would be able to survive, but they left it in there. And then I wasn't very conscious, you know, very often, like probably 5 minutes, 10 minutes at a time. And I was in the intensive care unit for, I think, 8 days. The surgery was just such a major thing that they had to do. I was on so many medications, and they were pumping me full of fluids, and I wasn't allowed to drink at all. And I remember having to suck on a sponge to try and like keep my mouth hydrated, which was not fun at all. But the first thing I did drink when I could was a cherry slushie. I just remember they brought it in and they handed it to my mom. And I remember kind of laying down, trying to grab at it. She says that she'll never forget the look on my face when I took a sip, but I took like a little sip and then I went, or something like that, you know. Just because I could only have like 3 little tubes that are like this tall and, you know, that thick. You know, I couldn't drink anything basically, but yeah, I had to monitor that. My parents did it for me because I couldn't do anything for myself. And then I finally got moved up to the normal floor for patients, and then there were a few complications, you know. I had to have 6 procedures, I think. I had been in there for probably 15, in the hospital for 15, 18-ish days. And then they found there was clotting in the kidney. So they were thinking they might need to just go in, take it out, start all over. And, or they could do procedures to break up the clots. So they said it was our decision, and we were like, well, if there's a procedure that we can do to save this kidney, we will do it. So they did what was called an angiogram, where they went in, and with blood thinner, they broke up the clot. So they went in through this leg and broke up the clots. And then the next day, they were doing an ultrasound to see if they broke it up. Well, they had this one technician who didn't know my body. He didn't know where anything was. He was kind of he wasn't very reliable, I guess. And then the doctor that looked at the ultrasound didn't know me either. So they're like, and I remember I was laying there and I listened to them, and and my parents are right next to me, and they're right next to me on this side. And I just remember listening to them, and they're going, oh, well, that's the big thing that leads to the little thing, but what's this other thing? And they actually used the word thing. And I remember being confused. And then they turned to me and my parents, and he's telling us, well, you know, blah, 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 and there's this big thrombosis, and he's just using all these big words, and we're like, something's backwards here. So it's like, so does that mean there's clotting? He's like, yeah, I don't think they broke up the clot. I think that you need to have this procedure again to break up the clot. Or he thought the clot had come back, or it was a new clot or something. So then I go over to the university hospital, which is where all the adults are, for the procedure. And that's actually where I had the first one, over at the university. But so they go in, do the exact same procedure, and then afterwards, I'm sleeping, and then my parents are talking to the doctor, and he said, yeah, we think that guy was looking at something else because the clot was broken up. You know, everything looked fine. So then there was they thought there might have been some clotting in my renal artery because they were doing the renal vein. So they decided that they would do an infusion of TPA, which is a really good blood thinner, in the artery overnight. So what they did was they had a procedure where they took me in, put a little bit of an IV in my leg, and infused the TPA overnight. And then the next morning they took it out, or they were going to take it out if the clotting had gone down a lot, and it did, so that was really good. That was just a horrible, horrible night. You know, I'm just in pain, and I had to go to the bathroom, but I couldn't be, and then the doctors over there were so, I don't know, I can't even think of the right word, but I had to have a catheter put in so that, you know, I could use the bathroom, but I'm not allowed to move. So I ended up having they put in 6 different catheters because they couldn't get them right. I don't know how they could, you know, I don't know how that happens, but just, it was not a fun time.
No.
And then I ended up having a complication where after that procedure, I ended up, you know, peeing blood, which is probably, that was my body's way of getting rid of all the clots that broke up.
Mm-hmm.
But there was one night where I couldn't pee at all. because there was a blood clot that was so big that it was blocking everything. I had to pee out a blood clot that was the size of a hot dog bun. It was really that big. And I remember my nurse looking at me and going, "Oh my God, you just gave birth!" Oh my God. And it was not fun. But then things started to get better.
I hope so.
Oh yeah. And then, you know, there wasn't really much more they could do. There weren't really any more procedures. And I remember my doctor was like, well, we're going to put there's going to be one more procedure to do. We'll put a stent in your ureter to kind of open it up, make sure it's open so you can go to the bathroom and everything. And then probably we'll be able to get you out of here. But you'll still need to stay in the Utah area so that we can keep an eye on you. So I went over to the university again, but I didn't have to stay overnight, thank God. And they put the little stent in to keep it open. And then I think it was the next morning I was discharged from the hospital.
Oh.
Or it was a day after, but around noon the doctors came in and they're like, well, you're getting discharged today. How would you like that? And I remember I was tearing up, and then I FaceTimed my theater class and I told them, and they all cheered. After being in the hospital, you know, there was still hope that the kidney would kick in. When I was in the hospital, you know, things weren't too great. I would have dialysis and my kidney function would look better, and then it would get worse, and then it'd get better, and then it'd get worse. But it was getting better because of the dialysis. So when I got out, they kept monitoring me. I had to get dialysis about once a week down there. But they just kept monitoring things, and then they ended up saying, we don't know if this kidney's gonna start working again. So we're gonna have you start registering for pre-transplant. You know, 2 weeks down there, I just wanted to go home. There wasn't really anything to do. We were just sitting there, we were miserable. And about a week before we headed home, my brother came down to spend some time with us. So that was really good seeing him, because it had been, you know, over a month since I had seen him. And I didn't think I'd miss him, but I did. And then I just remember wanting to go home for the homecoming football game. You know I had graduated, but I love seeing all my friends. And one of this girl who I think of as a little sister to me, she had made the dance team, and she's like, "You're the reason I tried out. You were my inspiration," you know, things like that. And I just really wanted to be there for her first performance, but I ended up not making it down there. I just remember being so upset, and I was talking to the doctors like, I need to go home, because everything was starting. And so the doctors ended up talking, and they're like, well, we can get you set up with the dialysis clinic up in Helena. You just need a more permanent catheter. So they did a procedure, took the temporary catheter from about here, and then they put it down right here. And then the next morning, we headed home to Helena. And then I ended up going to Capitol that next Monday to surprise everybody. I went and surprised my theater class. I knocked on the door, and this kid, one of my friends, he opened the door. He's like, "Holy sh!" You know, he was like nobody knew I was coming home. Everybody thought I was still in Utah, you know. And I just remember I walked in, and I'm like, "Am I interrupting anything?" And they're like, "Oh my God!" You know, everybody just starts cheering and comes over and hugs me, and that was really cool. And then I got to hang out with some other friends at lunch, so that was awesome. I remember I texted my friend. I'm like, "Hey, where are you right now?" And then he tried to call me, and then I see him coming through the hallway, and he comes up to me, picks me up, and just swings me around in this big old hug. And so that was awesome. And then he went and got my other friend, and she was coming up, and then she saw me, and she threw her food at her other friend and just gave me the biggest hug ever. And that was awesome. It was really amazing seeing everybody. I just missed everybody so much, you know. I was hanging out with all these people over the summer, and then all of a sudden, I don't even get to say goodbye. It was kind of hard, yeah. Because I had a bunch of friends that were here from all over the country with the Montana Shakespeare Company. I didn't get to say goodbye to them, which was really hard, because they all went to University of Southern California, or they were in Chicago or wherever. But that was probably one of the hardest parts, just not being able to say goodbye to them after working with them for so long. But seeing all my other friends who I'd known for years was the best part, you know, just seeing them was great. And then a couple weeks later, we had an appointment in Utah for just a normal checkup. Yep. We're always back and forth, you know, with Salt Lake. Just my entire life, we've been, you know, back and forth.
It's a great city.
It is. It's great, and there is a lot to do, but you know, not having energy is hard. So then we had my normal appointment, and then the next day we did pre-transplant. So I got back on the list to do that. So we did all the meetings, and all my tests had been done, all of that stuff. We just needed to find a donor. And we had several people in line, you know. My aunts had thought about it, you know, they had offered, you know, we had a few other people. One of my aunts who really wanted to do it, and it turned out she wasn't the right blood type. That was the main problem, because my blood type is O positive, and O positive is the most common blood type, but an O recipient can only get from an O donor, but an O donor can give to any blood type. You know, if it's A, B, B, they can all get from an O donor, but then there's O who can only get an O. So I couldn't get one from any other blood type. So it's really hard to get a kidney from an someone who has O type blood. So we were struggling to find a donor for a long time. And then we had my dentist. He had offered to give me one, and he was going through the pre-transplant stuff. But for some reason, the people in Salt Lake just dropped him. They stopped working him up, but they didn't tell him at all. And that's when they started working up Ryan.
I guess kind of how I got involved in this goes back to when I was in middle school. Also went to C.R. Anderson, and then to Capitol High, graduated in '92. But a good friend of mine back then, Jay Lindgren, is Ashley's uncle. And Jay was just always, you know, kind of there for me. We really became probably closer a little bit after high school, and just really got to know each other well. And so I'd known the Lindgren family for a long time. I knew her grandparents, Ashley's grandparents, her parents, I've known for a long time too, Dave and Tammy, and just good people. And so as I was hearing more about this, at a similar time, actually just before that, my son had gone through some challenges, and Dave Lindgren is a teacher at C.R. Anderson, and he had really helped Kyler a lot. And so I kind of knew what it was like to have a child that you couldn't fix what was wrong with them. Obviously nothing to the degree of what Ashley has gone through. And then I saw it on Facebook, actually, on a GoFundMe page, because in my experience, the Lindgrens they're not going to go out of their way and ask for help. They're going to be there to help other people. And so I learned of that and, you know, donated the money on that and didn't really think much about it. Well, then, you know, I heard more and more about it from Jay, and I just thought more and more about this. And I was working at New West Health Services at the time, and we unfortunately had to close our company down. So come February, I found myself with some extra time on my hands. And, you know, coming from that background of health insurance and seeing when people are in need, and really in health insurance, we wanted to help as many people as possible anyways. And I just had this gut feeling. And so I asked Jay what Ashley's blood type was. And of course he said, I don't know. And so I reached out to her dad and asked him what blood type she was. And he had said O, and I knew I was O. And I knew the challenges between getting either blood transfusions or organ transplants from non-O. I guess we're only allowed to take other O's. And so I asked him about it, and I don't think he probably even thought much about it. I called him the next day and said, I'm really serious about this. And this would have been in probably the first part of February. And finally, mid-February, I got the paperwork from Dave on figuring out how to do it, because they did have another person in the mix, of which Dave was one of the people that they were looking at a possible match. Unfortunately, it just wasn't working out with that. So I was kind of in a holding period for a little while in February, March, and then I think it was the end of April. I was contacted, mid to the end of April, I was contacted by the University of Utah, and they had said, okay, let's go ahead and start this process. So the process is you go online and you fill out a pretty extensive questionnaire at first. Then from there, it's a few days, maybe a week, and they contact you and say, okay, you're going to the next step. From there, you get a lot of lab work done, urinalysis, blood work. Then they say, okay, now you're a match. At that point, once I knew we were a match, I should have said, I hadn't seen Ashley since she was a little kid. Years and years ago, I think it was at Jay's wedding, is what we had decided. And I intentionally didn't want to meet her until I knew we were a match, because I didn't want to get her hopes up too much, even though I was in contact with Dave and Tammy a lot. And so we decided, okay, we're a match. Now there's still hurdles to overcome here. I now have to make sure my body is okay with this. So at that point, we had them over for a barbecue. And so I opened the door, and here Dave and Tammy and this, who I thought, remember as a little kid, this young lady who just looks at me and throws her arms around me. And it was a pretty emotional moment. And I guess any thoughts that I have of turning back disappeared at that point. So from there, I flew down to Salt Lake City and did a whole workup for the day. And essentially, they were just making sure that my body could handle it. You also go through a lot of mental preparation. I think I had an hour, 2-hour conversation with a psychosocial worker, because they really need to make sure that you as a donor understand. And they ask questions that, it's a good program because they ask questions that you don't think of. Like, what if this doesn't work? What if the person you give it to doesn't take care of it and it fails? I wasn't worried about it in this case, but those are things you have to emotionally prepare yourself for. So they had told me at that point, I remember I got the phone call, I was out back working in the yard, and I got the phone call that said, you're a match, you're approved, we're ready to schedule surgery. And they wanted to schedule surgery, I think it was into July at that point, and I said, no, I've got this kidney I'm not using, so
We're going to get this done.
yeah, we've got a young lady who's not in a place of health. We've got the solution here. Let's get moving. And so initially they talked about June 6th, and this was the very end of May, and we decided that was probably a little too quick with them and us, and so we scheduled it for June 20th and headed down. Yep, we all headed down. I think you went down the day before on Sunday.
Yeah.
And I loaded up a caravan with myself and my 2 boys. I've got a 14 and a 15-year-old sons, my parents, and then my girlfriend. And we rented a Suburban and drove down. Once my mind was made up, it was made up. I'm probably one of those guys who's probably better if I don't think things through, because I just jump in and do it. And it's worked out so far. Probably the harder thing was understanding, or helping my family understand, both my parents and aunts and uncles and cousins, and obviously the boys were key, and then my girlfriend Alyssa, understand why this was so important to me, because it really came out of left field to all of them. Literally. It really did. And my boys, both of them were very proud of me from the start. From what they said, they knew everything was going to be okay. There were some people in the family that it took a little bit longer to get there than others. I think that day that Ashley and her family came over for the barbecue, we had actually had quite a bit of family over here. And so I think she won everybody's hearts over that day, and that helped a lot. But this was just a very personal decision to me, and I still to this day don't know why exactly I did it. I've said things like her Uncle Jay, I'll never forget, I was 20 years old and my grandfather passed away, and Jay was the first person there for me. And so you think of the actions of a young, and I'm sure we were irresponsible 20-year-olds, comes back 23 years later to help somebody. I've never forgot that. The family, or the help that Dave was able to give my sons. They're great people, and I can say that over and over, and there is truth to that. But at the end of the day, I don't know why I had the calling to do it. I just did. I've always been an organ donor on my driver's license, which I would encourage people, again, that's a personal decision and a private decision, but I would encourage everyone to have that talk. Living donation probably isn't for everyone. In our case, it just happened to work out. I would say that the first place to start would be making sure you're an organ donor on your driver's license and you're registered as an organ donor there, because one person can actually save 8 lives by being an organ donor. You know, we don't like to think about that after we're gone, but the way I look at it, we're not going to be using it then anyways. That's a personal decision for other folks, and I fully respect that. But the opportunity to help others is something that people should really think about. And with the kidney donation, there was a couple different options as I learned about it and was taught, and then of course since talking with the Lingrens. There's the deceased, the cadaver kidney that Ashley could have got, and I think statistics are you would have been on the waiting list for about 5 years.
Yep, 3 to 5 years.
5 to 10, yeah, or depending.
Yeah.
And you know, there's so many people that go on that list, as we were just saying, almost 100,000 right now. There's the three ways where there's the cadaver or the deceased kidney, and it doesn't last as long. The outcomes just are not as good from what I've seen. There is a direct donation, usually from a relative. Then there's the donation from a friend or family member. The relatives seem to be the most common that I was seeing. And then there's also what they call a pairing. And I believe this is what your dad was scheduled for.
Yeah, my dad was in the had just finished up the. My dad had just finished up the process of paired donation, which is where he would give a kidney to someone, and I would get a kidney from someone else. Because he wasn't the correct blood type for me. I believe he was B positive was his blood type. I couldn't get a kidney from my dad, but he could always give it to someone else.
Interesting.
So it'd be a little bit of
Pair.
it would be a little bit of a trade.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And then there was where you can just donate a kidney. You don't have to know the person.
Yeah.
So for me, I was perfectly healthy when I walked into that doctor's office or the hospital on Tuesday morning. And then later that day, I was in a little pain. But it was nothing terrible. I'll never forget when I woke up, you know, how you are when you come out of surgery. The first question I was asking was, how's Ashley? Well, you know, it was too soon to tell because she was just, they told me that mine was a success. Everything looked good. The kidney looked great. It was a big, healthy kidney.
Big, healthy kidney.
The surgeon was very excited about it. So actually, a quick aside there, I was at the University of Utah, and Ashley was at Primary Children's, which is across the bridge. And so they actually took the kidney out of me, and the doctor personally walked it across.
Yep.
And there you go.
We actually had the exact same surgeon.
Yep.
So,
Is that right?
yeah,
And he was great.
he was amazing. He's actually the surgeon that did my emergency surgery last year. So
He knew well.
He knew me well.
Yes. Yeah, so even then when you wake up and you're hurting, and at least me personally, I never thought, what did I just do? I just never did. I had updates, you know, about how Ashley was doing as soon as I heard, you know, that they hooked the kidney up and they said it got pink and started working right away. And then her parents would give me updates. They came to see me. I started walking. I think I walked a couple hours after surgery to at least get up and do it, because everything that I had heard said you'll recover quicker. And it's interesting because from what I was told, Ashley woke up from surgery feeling better because she was still sick, and I was obviously at a place of health, so I woke up feeling worse. And so then you kind of cross to where I recovered pretty quickly. I was only in the hospital for 2 days. So I got out on Thursday. I had to stay in the Salt Lake area until Monday. But I finally got to see Ashley on Saturday, I think it was. And I walked up from my hotel room, which was about a 1.5 mile walk, partially to try and show her that I was okay. That, you know, I know that I've just done this, but I'm gonna be okay.
You're a madman. I remember he said that he walked from his hotel, you know, about 1.5 miles. I look at him and just, I wouldn't even walk that when I'm well. What? And you just had surgery. What are you doing?
Yeah, I paid for it afterwards, but it was to try and motivate Ashley and let her know I'm okay, because my recovery has been pretty easy compared to hers. For me, it's Well, with only having one kidney, I guess lifestyle changes for me because your life, was already that way before.
Yep.
But I can't take ibuprofen anymore or Advil, which is no big deal. You really don't want to get dehydrated. You have to drink extra water. Again, no big deal. I can't play contact sports anymore, so rugby is out, which, that's unfortunate. Probably fine. And that's when in the screening process, they ask you what your daily activities are, physical activities or sports. Those are really the key ones. You have to watch your protein intake a little bit and watch your blood pressure. It's pretty minor on my end. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm having surgery on June 20th. And I'm an avid outdoorsman, love to four-wheel, that kind of stuff. And I thought, okay, I'm not going to be able to do that for 2 months. But she is. Another person is going to be able to do that for the rest of their life. And now that we're 2 months tomorrow, I think it is 8 weeks tomorrow, I wouldn't change a thing. Like I said, I would go in and do it again right now if we needed to. There is a thing, and I was told about this, that when you get back from the hospital, and as the donor, you have to be careful because a lot of donors actually slip into a depression. And the reason is because they've gone from, everybody saying you're great, you're a hero, the doctors are there, and then you're home alone, and the focus shifts. I personally didn't experience that because I had a hard time with when everybody was telling me I'm a hero, and I get it, and I appreciate that. But I've struggled with that a little bit because I didn't do this for self, worth or for other people's approval or recognition. However, the satisfaction that it's given me, and it probably was 2 or 3 weeks after surgery, that I just kind of went, wow, I can't believe that we did this. And the personal satisfaction of that and seeing her is unlike anything I've ever experienced. And I think that's also why people should consider, being some type of a donor or helping other people out.
After surgery, I woke up and I immediately felt so much more energy. I felt like I could go and do so much more. And, I kind of move and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna lay down. I can, I'm very sore from the surgery, but I could tell a difference immediately. I was like, this is incredible, I just can't describe that feeling. It's just, I knew that everything was gonna be perfect. And now my life is back on track, and I'm gonna start school at the University of Montana this fall. So we're getting that all together. Now life is back on track, and I can start living again.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. Well, thanks to you.
Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed the program and learned quite a bit about being an organ donor. Did you know that any time in the United States of America, there's 117,000 folks, men, women, and children, looking in the need of an organ? And of those, nearly 100,000 are in need of a kidney. And maybe someday, you too will be an organ donor.